Thanks, Matt. Well, hello everyone. My name is Dennis, and I'll be talking about Symbergy. We are located in Switzerland, and these are the key problems that we are trying to approach. First off, crop failures. We've seen many of them last year. It's even getting worse this year, the way it looks. Maybe you've heard about the droughts in Italy. So it's a constant problem for growing food, or at least it is for conventional agriculture. The next problem we're looking at is fertilizer scarcity, or now even the massive price hikes that are happening partially because of the Ukraine conflict. And last but not least, consumers want their food to be grown more sustainably. That's just how they want this to happen nowadays. So what exactly do we do? So we are located at the northern portal of the longest train tunnel in the world. The town is called Erstfeld. It's really in the heart of Switzerland. And if you dig a hole this long, it will create a lot of water coming out of it. It just collects that throughout the mountains. And someone had the brilliant idea of taking that water and breeding fish with it. And because it is the longest train tunnel, there's a lot of water coming out of it. And the fish farm will be the largest fish farm in Switzerland. Now, we want to use their effluents or their wastewater. We are going to treat this wastewater in a way that the nutrients become available for plant production. We then use a hydroponic system to grow plants in this little town. Because this is a massive operation, we have the option to scale this up pretty highly. Our goal is to have an acreage of 12,000 square meters just in Erstfeld there. And the main reason for this is so we can obviously produce plants, but also we can create data models about how these waste effluents are turned into nutrients and the nutrient uptake of the plants. Because if this is done correctly, at the end, we will have clean water again that can either be returned to its original source or back to the fish farm if needed. Now, by doing this, we're actually solving a problem of the fish farm itself because they need to have that wastewater cleaned quite expensively. So we are adding value to them as well as producing sustainably grown crops at the same time. Now, with these data models and the ability to sort of clean water, we can take this to similar fish farms because the oceans are pretty much overfished, and land-based fish farms are basically the latest trends, and a lot of them will have this specific problem. Now, how are we going about this? First off, we need to build a scalable base system as a hydroponic system with a wastewater treatment in front of it, which is going to cost about 1.2 million Swiss francs. And this is what we're currently raising. Once we have this single part, we can multiply them locally and start creating data models that we then can use at other places to achieve the same goals: clean water, healthy crops, and solving problems for fish farms. And compared to other hydroponic projects, this also means we can create revenue from cleaning water, not only from growing plants. Now, very quickly, again, we are in the innovation project phase. The first column there, we are raising 1 million in equity. We've already raised 400,000 Swiss francs. Those are already secured, so 600 are still open. We are a supplier of the largest distributor in Switzerland. They're called Migros. We have a relationship with Reich Swan, which is one of the biggest seed suppliers worldwide. We also work with Sysag and Afry. Both are engineering companies. Afry is currently the leading engineering office that works on these land-based fish farms. So this is how we have access to potential expansion later on. Now, this is where we stand. Later on, we're obviously going to need a lot more money. This is capital intensive because they're basically industrial projects. But most importantly, in the end, if our financial projections towards the right, you can look at those. it is quite viable and profitable, despite it being in the primary section of an economy with agriculture. But we will also expand the product base towards pharmaceuticals.
Sorry, I forgot to give you a 1 minute timer. Time is up. Sorry, Dennis.
That's actually good.
Let me bring back Orelle and Ryan. And do you want to just share quickly how much you're raising?
1 million in equity, and 600 are still not secured. Yes.
Oh yes, you said that. My apologies.
Yeah.
My apologies. This time we'll let we did ladies first. Ryan, you're up this time. Do you have questions for Dennis?
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. Appreciate the presentation, and thanks so much for walking us through it. Can you? One thing that I'm trying to grasp is how this, whether this is a localized solution or something that scales across different geographies, and what that looks like. Can you just walk us through when you develop the initial sort of working model of this, how easy that is to replicate, and what that market looks like overall across the, whether your region or globally?
Yeah, so we scale up locally first to these 8,000 plants per day that we could produce, because this is a reliable number to create data models that can be replicated towards other projects around the world. Now, the land-based fish farms that are similar to the one we are working with is a newer trend. So we know there's over 30 projects in Europe alone that are similar to this, but that's about it for the time being. We have, as we mentioned, we are working with Orelle, who is the leading engineering company. They have a pretty good grasp on where all these projects are, and they're pretty much involved in all of them, because no one has as much knowledge as they do in this specific area. So for us, it would be quite simple to move on to, well, we are calculating with 5 additional sites. The numbers at the end from the last slide, by the way.
Got it. And then my last question, my next question, I should say, is just in how you think about the impact that you can have from a climate perspective. Have you modeled that out, or do you have a good understanding of what this would look like even now or at scale in terms of the impact that it can have?
Yeah, so the CO2 equivalent per kilogram of herbs that we would produce would reduce emissions, but it's 42 kilos. So if we produce a kilogram of herbs, we save 42 kilograms of CO2 equivalents.
And what is your anticipated scale as you grow in terms of how you do that?
So if we operate 5 sites, we're looking at 40,000 plants per day that are being produced. And roughly 3 herbal plants are, give or take, a kilo.
So 12,000 times 42,000, so 400,000 kilograms of CO2 then.
Yes. I mean, one site should be able to, in the calculations that we've made, it was roughly 2,000 tons per year that we could save per site with a basis of 8,000 plants. So with 5 sites, that's 10,000 tons per year.
What about on the fertilizer replacement side of things? Because I know we talked about that before. That's still where I see the more scalable businesses.
So the fertilizer part, the fertilizers themselves aren't really the problem. What we're saving is basically the production of fertilizers. And that is, in these calculations, less than a kilogram saved in CO2 equivalents per kilogram of herbs. So it's comparatively low what we're helping out with if we're just looking at fertilizers themselves.
Really? Because creating fertilizer is 20% of agricultural emissions, just the creation of the fertilizers themselves. Sorry, I was digging into this with another company I'm working with as an advisor, DOTS.
So in our case, we're comparing with just conventional agriculture in most, well, European nations. And a fair bit of them are on relatively good levels on their production. So they are not really that bad for the environment. Most farmers are quite modern and the use of mechanization is reasonable, let's put it that way. Obviously, most countries have an interest that less and less herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers are used because it can end up in the groundwater. So it turns out we're not doing that much better overall than these farmers that we compare ourselves to. The main component we are helping with is transportation, and that we produce products that have to be imported from warmer regions, for example.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. And Ryan, sorry for cutting you off. Did you have other questions?
No. Orelle, go ahead.
Yeah, I have one question. So I can imagine that in Switzerland, this specific fish farm that you're speaking about is probably the best fish farm in the world in terms of the conditions that the fish are living in and how well managed it is. And I'm sure you understand what I mean in terms of Swiss logistics. So I guess my question is, like, I'm wondering how replicable this model is literally anywhere else in the world where these fish farms aren't necessarily in the best condition. So I guess just like sanitation wise, quality and safety, like how do you see that in terms of expanding globally?
So most projects in this particular field are happening in Europe, and the leading country by far is Norway. They have roughly 27 projects ongoing. They're really strong in this field, and well, the rest is sort of placed in different places in Europe, but most of them are quite modernized industrial nations. So the first projects where we can expand to, I don't believe it's a problem that let's say the quality wouldn't suit our needs.
Okay. Thank you.
And your plan is to operate the fish farms yourselves versus potentially licensing them?
No. Well, we don't really operate the fish farms at all. We build relationships.
I meant agroponic farms themselves on top.
So the first one for sure, because we need to have absolute access to the data itself, and our sensors will be obviously near the plant so we can check nutrient update. But once we have the base models, it can absolutely make sense that we have other people who run the hydroponic side of things. Again, this is not the focus of it. Our focus is to figure out how to most optimally turn wastewater into nutrients and make sure that at the end we end up with clean water. So it definitely is an option to later on have both the financing side as well as the operation side of the hydroponic process given to someone else who may be better at this.
Understood. I see that much more as the VC case, giving that away and handling the core effluents and water processing. It just seems more scalable.
Yes,
but maybe that's just me personally.
We just have to make sure every time that we have access to the data and that we are exclusively the ones who will be sitting on that data.
Understood.